Joining me for analysis on today's Supreme Court decisions is Jeremy Dys, Deputy General Counsel at First Liberty, a legal organization dedicated exclusively to protecting religious liberty for all Americans. Jeremy, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
The justices, we'll start first with the travel ban. The justices upheld the president's travel ban, citing national security concerns. Do you think this opens the door for stricter immigration policy, whether it's Trump or future presidents?
We'll certainly have to see, but what the court has certainly done here is to say that it is within the purview of the president to make some of those decisions. You know, I like Justice Roberts, or Chief Justice Roberts, I'm not going to take a stab at the soundness of the policy itself, but it is at least the way that the court has looked at this to view, to say we're going to follow the law here, that the president, the executive power of the president, has the right to define these immigration rules, and we need to be respectful of that under our constitutional form of government.
Okay, so we'll be following this case, of course, throughout our program as this develops in the next coming months. I want to switch over to our pro-life case that we've been covering today because many have been calling this a victory for faith-based crisis pregnancy centers. This decision sort of coupled free speech as opposed to conscious rights. In the end, which argument do you think really won out and got the justice's attention? Well,
if you look at Justice Thomas's opinion, it's very clear that he was looking at it from a speech perspective, saying that this is a ban against speech, and not only speech, but against the person trying to do the speaking of that. We filed a friend of the court brief in this matter as well to remind the court that no one should be compelled to speak a message by the government, that if speech is going to be free, it has to be free for the people to both say what they wish to say and not say what they don't want to say. And I think what the court has done today is rightly upheld that fundamental right of the First Amendment. But I think you also saw marks of conscience in there as well. Justice Kennedy's concurring opinion was very clear on that point as well, that conscience is to be respected. Whether or not you have the same opinion, whether or not the government has the same opinion as you do, it's not the place of the government, in this case the state of California, to tell people what you have to speak, what you have to believe. That's something that is forbidden by the First Amendment.
How do you think this decision today could affect other court challenges like in states like Hawaii or Illinois?
Well, I think that's going to take some time to figure that all out, of course, as this whittles its way down back into the lower court system. But what I do know is this, is that the important principle that's been upheld here is that speech can only be free when the speaker is free to speak. And to speak what they believe or don't believe. And I think that's going to have broad implications, not just simply within the pregnancy care center world. Of course, that's going to be the immediate and beneficial aspect of that right now. But I think also in other aspects where there may be business owners or nonprofits that are being compelled to speak a message with which they disagree. I think today's ruling by the Supreme Court is an important one to make sure that no one is forced to speak a message with which they disagree.
These rulings really help the president in terms of making good on his campaign promises, tougher stand on immigration, support for pro-life movement. How do you think this sort of energizes the base now coming into midterms?
Well, certainly with the immigration policy that's been upheld, that was President Trump's, but also on this pro-life measure, this free speech measure, the president has been very outspoken on both of those measures and has taken a lot of steps to make sure that people of faith are protected. You look at the Department of Justice and the programs that they've put into place, the executive memo on religious liberty, the executive order on religious liberty in the United States, whether it's the president himself or his Department of Justice or within the courts now itself as well. I think what we're seeing is a marked departure from what we've seen in the past 8 years, where we now have a president that is committed to protecting the free speech and conscience rights of its citizens.
It's interesting when you look at the rulings today, they were both 5-4. How is the composition of the court, especially with the addition of Justice Neil Gorsuch, sort of adding to or aiding the president really in accomplishing his goals, if you think about it?
Well, I'm grateful to see Justice Gorsuch on the bench and to see that he has been, I guess, a deciding vote in both of those cases, that Justice Gorsuch has been within the majority of those cases that have upheld not only a masterpiece cake shopper from a few weeks ago where there were 7 justices voting in favor of important conscience rights, but now in NIFLA as well as in some of these other cases where you have Justice Gorsuch demonstrating that he's got a commitment to a smaller government, that he's got a commitment to the religious liberty and the free speech rights of American citizens. That can only be good for freedom in our country.
Such a big day in the Supreme Court, so many important cases to talk about. Jeremy Dys, Deputy General Counsel at First Liberty, thanks so much for your analysis today.
Thanks for having me.